Hello everyone, and thank you for joining, and welcome to our live demo of Orchard, the platform for crowdsourced design. I'm Dan, and standing by on chat is Eric and Pat, and they're there to answer any questions you may have, and we're the co-founders of Orchard. So you guys can use the YouTube chat for any questions you might have, any comments or anything while I'm doing this stream. But today we're going to be modeling a filament clip. We're going to go through the whole process of 3D printing all the way, 3D modeling all the way to 3D printing the clip. So it's pretty exciting, and hopefully you'll be able to learn a lot from it. So what is a filament clip? Well, it's a clip for holding the 3D printing filament, the end more specifically, up against the inside of the spool so that it doesn't dangle like this, or tangle, or any sort of problems you might have with it. You'll notice that as soon as I take it apart or away from that thing, it starts to get really loose, and this causes problems. Sometimes the filament actually folds in under itself and it causes a knot, and so then you can't print with that. And usually filament or spool makers just put these little holes in there, and they're set at certain locations, and so it can be kind of a pain to have this dangling filament out here like this. So we're going to solve the problem with Orchard and hopefully teach you how. So let's go ahead and share this screen here. So we'll start with an overview of the platform. This is Orchard. So Orchard is a platform for crowdsourced design, and that means that's design done by anybody with access to the internet. So anyone with the internet designing things together. You can think of crowdsourced taxis like Uber, or Wikipedia as crowdsourced information. So we're crowdsourcing design. And we built this to empower everybody or anybody with the internet to contribute to building the future. Everything we see around us was built by people with expensive, fragmented, really hard to learn tools. And we figured that was ridiculous. Why should it be only limited to professionals? Everybody has ideas. And when we begin to think about how many ideas are lost every day just because people don't know where to get started, it's a shame. So imagine if something like this water bottle, or this chair I'm sitting on, or this table, or any of that was designed by the internet. Well, then you could start to think about the internet designing things like cars, houses, or even spaceships. And so it's really exciting to think about what can happen when people have the right tools in mind. And so we think this platform can make just the entire process of consumption and production much more efficient, because it empowers people to locally make their own products. And so we think that's pretty powerful. I'm going to go ahead and pause here just for a second if there are any questions. Like I said, go ahead and enter those questions in the YouTube chat. Alright, if there's no questions, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the actual demo of the interface. This is the main page that you go to when you navigate to the app. You can see all the main designs. These were all designed on Orchard just by people from all over the world. A lot of them are Patrick and Eric and I, but there are a lot of new ones from many other people. So if you go Sorry about that. Alright, so this is the main page. All of these designs were made by people around the world, and you can select any of them just by simply clicking them. We'll just click this fan cover to take a look at it. And this shows the single design view, so it shows everything about this single design. You can left click and drag just to rotate and look at the object itself. And so that's the main preview window. And on the right here you'll see the Orchard tree. And this tree traces out the evolution of this object over time as people contribute to it. So you can see this object started as this design in the bottom right, And as I hover my mouse over the tree nodes or branches, I can see a little preview of a little thumbnail of what's changed in that branch. So I can go ahead and I can select any of these, look at them, decide, okay, that's cool, and I can approve of them, say, you know, this is a well done design, I think that's great. It's equivalent of a like. I can purchase this item by pressing buy, and what that does is link to our third-party fabrication services, and they will enable you to find some local printer near you and print from a range of any types of materials between plastics, ceramics, industrial metals, so on and so forth. It's pretty cool. Or if you have your own 3D printer, you can download it by pressing this button. And if that's not quite right, you can go ahead and press this button in the bottom left to edit that design. I'll go ahead and do that really fast. And so you can see I'm here in the interface, and I'll get into the interface in a minute when we design something. But the first thing you'll notice about the interface is how empty and plain it kind of looks. And that's different from most other design interfaces because most of them show you your tools, the available tools, all at once. And the problem with this is it forces you to have to learn when you can use these things, when you're able to extrude, when you're able to sketch. And we figured why not make that automatic? In other words, why not make that happen based on what you click? So I click this object and I get a variety of options related to that. So we'll get into that in a minute, but once you make whatever changes you make to the scene, you can save the design. And I'm just going to go back here. And when you do save it, it will propagate a second branch here. So the tree will actually grow and you'll be able to see your contribution, and everyone else in the world will be able to see it because all of these designs are in open source. So going back to the main page, on the bottom right here you see there's a chat button, and right here you can contact us. We're always on, we're always developing. So here's where you'll be able to ask any questions, give feedback, give anything at all. Just get in touch with us. You use that chat button in the bottom right. In the top right is the menu. So here you'll be able to log in, sign up, subscribe, do those things, and you'll also be able to access our forum where you'll be able to interact with other users and talk about various topics, any other forum you're used to. And below that is Learn, which is our education center where you can go and learn everything about Orchard. There will be things about designing for 3D printing, all the basics of what an extrude or sketch or just every part of Orchard is in that section. Down here is a light and dark theme toggle. So if you're designing late at night and you don't want a bright light in your face, change it over to dark. Below that is our blog, and then finally contact. So that's our menu. Next to that is our help button. And this has embedded YouTube videos, so you'll be able to search YouTube, say things like sketching, and you'll be able to get all of the related videos to sketching below that and watch them right in the interface. So here we see different things. So it's pretty helpful, hence why it's called help. Next to that is the search button. You can search through any types of designs, maybe box. You'll see everything tagged with box, or you can search through users, tags, design names, categories, things like that. And then next to that is the sorting, so you can sort it by the number of approvals, when it was created, when it was last updated, so on and so forth. So by default it searches by approvals. I'm going to go ahead and turn it to light theme just here. And in the top left here is our profile. So this is my profile. I can see all of my designs here that I've created over time. On the left is a bio. I can enter just information about myself, and so you can think of this as building yourself a design portfolio. Over time you build up kind of everything about you and what you design, and that's kind of the intent on this page. There are also tabs, so over here is a private tab. What we've enabled is private accounts. If you'd like to keep your designs private without sharing with anyone, our plans are at $7 a month or $70 a year. So going back to the main page here, on any design as I mentioned before, you press this button to edit it, but on this main page you press this button to start a new design. So that's what we're going to do. So again, here's the interface. On the top right we have the menu as with the main page, except this time it has all the options related to the actual interface. So you can toggle visibility of the faces, edges, vertices. You can change your units. In this case we are going to be designing in centimeters, so we'll keep it there. You can also change your degree units and how many digits you want to display. Next to that menu is the help. Again, this is throughout the entire site. You can search different videos and watch them right here to get help. Next to that is the buy button. So whatever you create, you'll be able to purchase and purchase through our third-party 3D printing service. So you'll be able to connect to 3D hubs and order a 3D print right in the interface. Next to that is save. Here it's telling me to create something before I can save it, but this is where you'll be publishing each tree, branch, everything. Every time you publish, you'll be using this button. Next to that is undo redo. Over here we navigate back to the interface, or the browse page, or single design view. Down at the bottom left here, there are the add buttons. So here we can add basic primitive shapes. For those of you who've used Tinkercad before, this is where you add things like a cube, cone, sphere, cylinder, torus, basic objects like this where you just enter in basic information like, let's say 20 centimeter radius sphere. Press the check mark once and it creates the sphere. So you can add objects. We'll go ahead and double click and delete this object. So above the add primitive shapes you can add backgrounds. This is kind of cool. So basically any type of object you want to give a background to that helps communicate what that object is, you can do it with this button. I'm sorry. So I'm using an old MacBook Pro from 2011 just to give you an idea of the capabilities of this website. Unfortunately, any type of actions related to even Google Maps sometimes causes WebGL to crash, which is fine. Orchard still works on WebGL, but without WebGL enabled. However, it's just not ideal, so just simply refresh. Sorry about that. Alright, well, so you can add backgrounds. You can add, above that is the button to toggle your sketches. Right now we don't have any sketches, so we won't have any to toggle on and off, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then finally at the top here, you can add a part from a different scene. So you can pull in any of the 3D objects from other scenes into one of the scenes that you're working on, which is very handy when you want to utilize multiple components to combine and create new things. So there are two ways to get, next to, in the bottom right here, you can toggle different camera views, camera angles, isometric views, fit view, things like that. Next to that, you'll be able to set materials and apply materials, different things to objects. I'll just give you an idea here. We'll create a cube and apply a wooden texture. So I'm going to double click the object to select it. Press edit here now that I'm in the texture menu. You can do things, scroll through various textures to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and select this wooden texture here. And by default, the textures are this kind of bluish color, so if you want to make the true color for that texture, go ahead and bring all the RGB color values all the way to the right to make them white, and you'll be able to see. Here's the textures. So you have textures like wood, stones, dirt, whatever textures like that, and then on the left you have the different settings for those textures. You can change things like the opacity to make it look transparent. Roughness. If you have very rough surface, it won't reflect as much light, whereas a low roughness is a very shiny object. Let me go ahead and remove this texture to show you what I'm talking about. The bottom will change colors. So you can see that light reflecting. Roughness changes how reflective the object look. Here it will look kind of plasticky. So then there's metalness, how metallic it looks. So there's a lot of cool little settings you can do in the materials. I'll delete that for now. And then next to that, of course, you can ask us questions. Okay. So there are two different ways to get started in any model. You can either add a primitive object like we've done a couple of times, or you can do something that, or you can sketch. And this is something that things like Tinkercad and other programs don't have available. So we are, or at least the programs that are based on Boolean operations that add just primitive objects, subtract, or union them, things like that. We're going to start with a sketch. Okay. And so here's the sketch interface. One thing you'll notice is that undo, redo are disabled in this mode. So just keep that in mind. It won't always be the case, but for now that is. And we can do different things like select different sketched elements, draw lines, circles, or arcs. This closes a sketch, which deletes it, and this accepts the sketch, which you won't be able to do until you have closed loops, which I'll show you what that means in a second. So we're going to start with lines. And I'm going to create at first just this vertical line here. And just to get a sense of scale, I'm going to set that line length by single clicking it, single left clicking it. And you'll notice, again, this is model-driven design, so everything you click will give you different options. So we have this line selected, and we have the options to do different things called constraints, which I'll explain here in a minute. That helps you if you're not a very good drawer or anything. You can constrain the sketch to be exactly how it's supposed to be, including things like the length. So here, I've constrained the vertical length to be 7.75 centimeters. And what I'll do is then use that to sort of outline the basic profile of what I would like to create. So I don't have to worry about it being perfect right now. It just needs to be sort of approximated. So I've drawn these outside lines, and now I press escape twice, or I can just press select just to kind of get out of that mode, and I can do things like move lines around, and adjust whatever I need, just like this. So, however, we're not done because we haven't created an airtight closed loop, and so we're going to add an arc here just to close off this loop here. And you'll notice that the sketch itself went blue, and that indicates you're good to go. There's a closed loop. However, if you add some random other straggling line here, you'll notice that it's no longer a closed loop, so you'll need to do something like, for example, select a line and create a construction element out of it so that it is not utilized for that sketch profile. So construction elements are helpful if you want to just use them as a reference point, i.e. for constructing your sketch. But for here, we don't need it, so I'm going to delete it. And so now, this thing looks a little crazy. There's uneven lines and all that, so we're going to go through and do apply constraints and constrain, for example, this line horizontally. You'll see now when I drag this, it will stay horizontal. And we're going to combine various elements to apply different constraints. So I'm just going to go through here and, holding Command on this Mac or Control on a regular machine, select all of the vertical elements. This one I already selected before. And you'll notice that because multiple elements are selected, I have different options. I can make them all equal length or parallel. In this case, I'm just going to make them all vertical. And then I will go through and select these lines, which aren't horizontal yet, and make those horizontal. Okay, now I'm going to go through and set some various dimensions. So we know this top line needs to be 0.75 centimeters, so I'm going to select it and then press this check mark to constrain it to that. I'm going to go through and do the same to these others. We're going to set this to 0.575. Oh, this one's not horizontal. And you'll notice as I'm going through and constraining it, things shift around and adjust accordingly, which is good because that's exactly what we want. We want it to behave. So you can do fancy things like I'm going to set, for example, this horizontal distance between this line and this point to be 0.2. So I can select this point and this line and I could set it that way. Or I can select these 2 points, and this will give a vertical and a horizontal component, or just the raw distance between the two. And in this case, I want the horizontal distance to be 0.2. Just sets the center of this circle off from this wall 0.2 centimeters. Since this shifts around a little bit, we're going to go ahead and constrain these 2 points vertically. Same with these two. And again, holding Control to select multiple entities. So this distance here, we're going to want to specify that to be 0.125 centimeters. And things are still shifting around a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is constrain this angle to be 130 degrees. And you can do things, and conversely down here at the bottom, I'm going to constrain this one as 180 minus 150. So what I was about to say is you can do things like enter equations and do equation-driven inputs to the dimensions. So here we'll constrain that to 50 here. Oh, sorry, we want that 180 minus 130. That looks more like it. Okay. So we want this distance between these two, horizontal distance, to be 0.25. And we want this opening, the opening to allow the filament to go through, to be 0.25. Okay. So we haven't constrained the radius of this yet, but let's go ahead and go around and constrain these other dimensions first. And again, we're going to set these two distances to be 0.2 vertically, 0.2 horizontally. And that's made quite a difference in the look of our sketch. Okay. So I believe the last thing to do is set this radius 0.11. Okay, so the filament diameter I have is 1.75 millimeters, and half of that is 0.875 millimeters, so the radius would be 0.0875 millimeters, or I'm sorry, centimeters, which we've added basically a 0.3 or so centimeter tolerance on each side. Okay. The last thing we want is these two. Oh, these are equal. Okay. All right. So we have our sketch. It is fully constrained, and now we press the check mark to close the sketch mode. You'll notice that the view itself has toggled back to perspective view, and what that means is I'll show you what that means. By default, when you sketch, you go to orthographic views, and over here in this camera type, you can toggle it. So you click the camera options come out, and then in the bottom left, you select camera type, and you'll notice how the view actually squares up with what you're looking at. That's important for when you're moving things or sketching, but otherwise, if you're in 3D mode, it's usually better to be in perspective camera. So that should happen automatically, but if it annoys you, you can toggle it down here in the camera options. So here's our little filament clip, and we're going to pull this 2D sketch into a 3D sketch, 0.5 centimeters, and there we go. I did that a little fast, so I'm going to go ahead and do it one more time. Again, here in the bottom left, the add, I mentioned our list sketches. You just hover over here, click left click list sketches, and then press sketch. And you'll see a list of all of them if you have multiple, but there's our sketch. And we're going to single click it one time, and we have this ability we have the option to extrude here. So we can revolve it or do other things if we had a secondary line, but for this case we're going to extrude it. Click that one time. We can manually drag it in either direction or just enter a value. In this case we'll enter 0.5. It applies the extrude, and there we have it. So now we want to do things like round off these edges, clean it up, make it look a little nice. But first, just because we want to be thorough, we're going to save it, because that way we can always go back to before we've rounded anything, before we've done any of that. So we're going to go save it. It's going to be a filament clip for a 1.75 millimeter filament. Alright, and so we want to make sure to name our part here, filament clip, and give it a little description. And save it. Alright, so now it says everything is saved successfully. Suppose instead of continuing, I'll go ahead and show you guys where it is. So now that we've saved it, the page doesn't auto refresh, so we're going to refresh it just to make sure it's there. Pull up all the newest information here. And by the way, on a side note, we will be refactoring some things in order to speed up this loading process. We know we've had a couple of complaints about that. We're pushing out new updates every week, so this will continue to get better. Okay. So, back on the main page, I see all these other designs, none of which are mine, because these ones are this happens to be sorted by the number of approvals. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to search and look up creation time, or actually go to my profile and just scroll to the bottom here where I can find my filament clip. There it is. So here's a filament clip, and because it's one single design, there hasn't been multiple iterations, the tree is just a seed. It's just the first node. And to edit it, we're going to just press this button, and boom, here we are. So you'll notice that the lines, everything are missing from this object. That's because it is turned from a shape, something that you can edit, move, and modify, into a part. So now it is a part, and the reason we do that is for large, complicated assemblies with thousands of parts. It keeps the site loading snappy. It keeps the performance going well. And we've ran this on a $100 Chromebook, and it works well with this setup. So in order to edit something, you actually single-click it. And you can do things like move, rotate, duplicate, or delete it. So we're going to edit that. It loads it into the scene, and now here it is ready for us to edit. And you'll notice that the lines are back, and you can select faces. And instead of single-clicking to select it, you have to actually double-click to select it. And here you can do, and so it's important to remember that anytime you want to modify anything, if you're taking two parts, for example, and doing a Boolean operation to cut one part from the other, both of them need to be able to be edited because they're both being edited in the process. Same thing with scaling, doing things like that. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes it can get confusing. But anyway, here we are back at our filament clip, and I want to round a few things so that when I'm sliding in this filament in through here, it comes out nice and easy back each way. So I'm going to fillet or round these edges by selecting them and holding Command to select multiple edges. I could do them one at a time, but this is faster. And I'm going to press fillet. And I'm going to do a 0.04 centimeter radius fillet. And it's important to remember, if you do a fillet that is larger, like for example, if I tried to make this round edge round with a radius that was like 1,000, and it would cut off a huge part of the model, what it's going to do is just crash. It's going to cause an error. So just keep in mind when you're rounding or flattening or chamfering, filleting, things like that, or even doing other operations, you just have to keep in mind for now the size of each operation relative to the geometry it's being applied to. So just to keep in mind, we'll round this off just because sharp edges are no fun. And I suppose we'll click this line and round that off as well. And so here I know that on my spool there's a rounded edge, so we definitely want to round those two edges, but this will be a little larger, 0.075. Okay. And we're going to do something a little different on these ones, called a chamfer, which will flatten it. We're going to give that a 0.05 chamfer. And so that just cuts off the edges there. And so as this thing is coming on and off the spool holder, these little 45-degree chamfers will help the part slide and snap into place. And just for good measures, we'll go ahead and do this a little rounded edge too, just so there's no stress and no stress fractures that propagate through there. Alright, so we've rounded the edges. Now we're going to save it. You can describe what you did. So I rounded the edges, fillets, and also same thing. Seems redundant right now, but when there's a lot of parts in here, it's good practice to go ahead and enter all the information you can. We're going to save it. So now we'll navigate back here, and we should be on the tree, and we'll see that there are two nodes. Our tree has grown. This object has evolved. It's exciting. And now we want to download and print this. So I'm going to go ahead and download this, and what it does is it loads the object, creates it, transforms into an STL, something that's 3D printable, and then we'll be able to download it here. Okay, so I see there it's in a zip, and forgive me for 1 second while I transfer over to the slicer view here. Okay. I hope you can see this. Let me double check. Yeah, okay. All right. Actually, this was from earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and get into my downloads here. Second filament clip. And we're going to drag and drop this into my slicer, which is Cura. Orient it so it's flat against the printer bed. I have my settings good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save this here. Filament clip 1. And then for the fun part, I get to take it over to my 3D printer here. And if you guys don't mind, I'll have to put you on hold just for a minute while I transfer this over. So bear with me, don't go anywhere, it'll just be 1 second. Okay, so here's my printer. It is a Wanhao Duplicator i3+. It's pretty basic. It's based on an open source design, which is why I chose it. You can add a lot of non-proprietary filament, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead. I have it preheating right now, so that might take a couple of minutes. I'm going to go ahead and navigate down here to my filament clip. Okay, I've selected that, so that's going to go ahead and preheat. And while that gets started, I'm going to check on any questions you guys might have. Okay. Just on a note on a couple of upgrades, a lot of these things on this 3D printer here you'll notice are 3D printed, and that's what's cool about 3D printing is you can 3D print your own upgrades, and with Orchard you'll be able to create your own sort of upgrades. One thing I've done is sort of modeled a similar open source version of this printer on Orchard so that I can go through and create modifications on it and then add them. Alright, so this bed is heating to 60 degrees Celsius. I've added a glass plate. For any of you guys who have 3D printers, I recommend absolutely adding a glass plate to keep your bed totally level and flat. Use a borosilicate glass, something really strong, i.e. Pyrex. And then on top of this, I've actually added a sheet. It's a PEI sheet, and it is amazing. Previously, I've had to use a scraper, and chop and just beat up my bed to get at the print, and as soon as I got this thing, it needs none of that. Everything sticks to it perfectly, and whenever it's cooled off, the things just literally pop off. It's really satisfying. Not to mention the fact they have this almost mirrored reflective. This would be pretty difficult to reflect, but okay. So it should get started here in a second because it is now preheated. Now this clip is so small it shouldn't take longer than 3 to 5 minutes or so to print. And we'll see how it works. Brian, you were asking about the zip. Yes, sorry, that was pretty quick. When you download something, it's automatically as a zip, just in case, as they've mentioned, it allows you to have multiple parts, multiple files at once. Some of these assemblies get pretty large. Let's see if we can get a better view here. So while this is printing, I'm happy to answer more questions. Alright, so it's about 40% done. I apologize for using this webcam as the camera setup. In the future we'll have a better view of the printed object. Alright, so it's halfway done. Maybe play some Jeopardy music here. And one thing, so the clip obviously is designed for these spools that I'm using, which happen to be from Maker Geeks. So they're the Maker Geek spools. I have a couple of other spools that have different dimensions, diameters, but you can always go through and modify those objects. You could, if the walls of the spool, for example, are a lot thinner than this, you can go ahead and just grab one of the inner walls and pull it so that the gap between the filament, the gap is a little smaller. Basically, you can modify these things on Orchard to fit whatever spool you have. That's the point of having the tree and having the tools, everything in one place. Okay, let's move it around here. So it looks like it's on its last little layer here, last couple of layers. There it is. Ta-da! Okay, so there's the clip. I want to give it at least a little bit to cool off a second so that when I pull it off I don't warp it at all. But I'm pretty impatient, so let's just... Oh, yep, it's definitely still soft. There we go. See? Literally just pops off. Look at that. Everything totally clean. Now all I have to do is wipe it down with alcohol and I'm good to go. Alright, so... Sorry about that. Here it is. This is the clip. Now 1 second while I transfer over to the other side. Okay, so we're back over here. Here's our clip. Here's our handy dandy little spool with this loose, annoying filament line. And so let's see how it fits. Sorry about that, it's kind of awkward. Wow, look at that. Snaps right on there. Alright, see that snap, and we'll attach our filament to the actual hole here, and there you have it. So I'll go ahead and print a few of these for this different spools, but just solved a problem on Orchard, and yeah, so it's highly satisfying. I definitely recommend making something and then 3D printing it. It's just, it will blow your mind, I promise. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the actual site here, and then we can go ahead and answer any questions you might have. Okay, sorry, I was taking a second to look at the chat. It's definitely, I would recommend, I mean, I guess it depends on your printer and set up everything, but I print off my SD card only because I don't want my computer to update or, you know, power failure, any of those problems. It's irritating, especially when you have something like a 30-hour print and it happens at hour 20. It hasn't happened to me, luckily, but I would definitely recommend printing off an SD card or something equivalent. Alright, well, yeah, and so that's the beauty. I'll actually show, so the beauty of these i3 style, Prusa style printers is that they are open source, so there is a lot of clones. For example, the Wanhao ones has a monoprice clone that's cheaper. It's basically the same thing. So here's the mock-up of the printer. I'm able to go in and add components and things like that, and if you'd like, anybody could take these components and remix them into their own type of printer. So we definitely should get a 3D printer going on Orchard, an open source version. So anyway, without further ado, I think if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and end this. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you learned a lot. Take care. Thank you.